But isn't religion a suspension of rationality?
Yes, it may well be. But even science sometimes asks the same of us. The special theory of relativity comes up with possibilities that are at variance with our understanding of the physical environment, inconsistent with our very experience of space and time that we live in and know through actual direct contact every moment. Quantum mechanics presents a picture of the universe that defies logic and reason as we know them and is absolutely counterintuitive. We know that our mind itself, the rational mind, is easily biased and is preconditioned. It can find justification for almost anything: violence, war, unfairness, inequality. We've even devised ingenious and sophisticated ways to institutionalize these. So, suspension of rationality should not seem like an unfamiliar space to us. Pick up almost any liberal newspaper. It presents itself as free and fair in its coverage, rational, logical, and scientific in its approach, critically commenting on anything that goes against reason. But the same newspaper carries daily and weekly horoscopes for its readers, yet we don't question its credibility or even its intention. According to some evolved traditions, the mind itself, which we so celebrate as the seat of reason and logic, is the first and primary hurdle to achieving enlightenment. Yet, many chauvinists try to present their specific faith or religion as a rational and scientifically sound idea. Many even go so far as to appropriate scientific discoveries, rewriting them into their religion's history. Every religion has a creation myth. And of course, hardliners and firm believers don't see it as myth, but as fact. Each religion builds its own expansive narrative, riding on such imaginative, stunningly beautiful, and powerful metaphors that it takes hold of multitudes of people over hundreds of years, even thousands of years, transporting them to another reality. The universe is made of stories, not of atoms, says a poet of our times. Yes, myths are fictions. They're not true. But they stay alive because they are loaded with truths and with values that form and define a people. And what is more, these myths don't shy away from addressing questions that deeply concern every single individual among those flocks of believers. Life might well be a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, as Shakespeare has Macbeth say. What seems to matter in the end is not whether the thought behind a religion is true or not, but its capacity to generate culture that people believe is life-preserving and life-enhancing.
What about the role of rituals?
A lot of reasonable and rational people criticize religion because they are opposed to rituals, they say. Actually, it is only a prejudice against religion. Ritual is nothing other than performing symbolic actions in a prescribed manner to express oneself. Its impact on our minds comes as much from the power and effectiveness of its form. Some rituals are very beautiful indeed. Ceremonies of any kind would be impossible without them. Don't we readily participate in them at weddings and other social functions? What's a birthday cake? At another level, even nations, and not just those still playing kings and queens, but republics and states too, with their larger-than-life presidents and powerful or popular ministers, all have elaborate rituals, displaying pomp and splendor. Armies have rituals. Institutions of all sorts, not just political, but social, commercial, and even educational. The world's most prestigious universities, schools, and colleges all follow old established traditions and regularly perform rituals, even in funny costumes, as do courts of law across the world with their high priests in strange gowns and sometimes fake wigs too. And just like religion, they all use these to create and stamp identities, reinforce hierarchies, and to assert authority. Sport is filled with ritual. Teams have them. Famous and popular sportspersons have their own irrational beliefs to control luck. Each society, in the form of culture, has rituals that enable its members to express ideas and emotions which everyday reality and language cannot. Families have them, as do all kinds of gangs and groups. Even individuals, in their aloneness too, build their own little rituals to anchor themselves, to cope with uncertainty, and to enlarge the intellectual, emotional, and I dare say, the spiritual space that they inhabit. In extreme situations of loss, like the death of a loved one, almost everyone falls back on rituals crafted by religious traditions. Ritual is not necessarily and not always superstition. Even so, there are irrational customs, beliefs, and codes that are cultural, coming from all areas of life. Yet we question them in the religious space, where ritual is actually but a form of prayer, with the belief that it is being or likely to be heard. But it is not faith alone that draws religious people to rituals. It is also the form, design, intent, and method which all come together to make them appealing. Religions do not address philosophic ideas only to the intellect. They know the fickle nature of the mind. So they ingeniously translate those ideas into symbolic practices that involve the whole person bodily, through all the senses, sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell, such that the idea enters one's very being and through cyclical repetition becomes integrated with life itself. The trouble is that these symbols invariably become ends in themselves and assume greater importance than even what they signify. It is these symbolic observances that create identities and give religions their power by making people into followers not only in their beliefs but also in their everyday lives and habits. And it doesn't end there. The still greater difficulty is that anything that creates identity creates otherness too.
Is the other always to be feared?
The other is not always a threat, and though different in some ways, can even seem attractive and actually bring new information and knowledge and infuse new energy into a community. However, the same entity may well be an instrument that introduces disruptive ideas and values that challenge an old, stable, and established order, or be a carrier of disease against which a community may have no immunity, and can therefore wipe out whole populations and indigenous cultures and ways of life, as has already been evidenced across whole continents. So, suspicion, resistance, and caution are only natural defenses. They have to be mechanisms and processes of understanding and building real trust before communities can embrace one another. That is where the focus must be. One of the central problems of life is that on the one hand, as social animals, Human beings have a need for other people, but at the same time, they also have a will to power, the urge and predisposition to dominate, which becomes all the more acute when resources are scant. To reconcile these two opposing forces within us is among the most important challenges which need to be addressed both at an individual level and the collective, because groups and communities use all means, even highly contentious ones, to appropriate a greater share of power. History has shown us far too often how the soldier and the preacher have traveled together. To convert everyone to your own belief system or point of view is not a solution, because the diversity of a multicultural society is the fertile soil necessary for growth and provides the true richness of life. The presence of contending or even competing ideas may challenge faith, but it also tests all one's beliefs, forcing one to be aware, consistent, and considerate at all times. One cannot escape the fact that as one sees the other, so is one seen from the other's side.